The Drum Candy Podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Drum Candy Podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson, coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This week is the first of two parts, 10 Reasons to Love the Great Max Roach. I'm joined here in my home studio with David Throckmorton and Thomas Wendt to dive deep into Max Roach, the legendary, pioneering jazz drummer, largely credited for being the architect of what we think of the modern jazz or the bebop jazz style. There's a whole lot more to his story, which we dive into pretty quickly. There's a little bit of caveat. I'll let Thomas kind of explain it more, but we kind of focused on, just by chance, some of maybe the more obscure stuff or the lesser known stuff. So we'll probably revisit Max again for maybe some more like quintessential Max Roach stuff. But I let Tom and Dave do all the selections for this one because I really wanted to get their input on some of this stuff. If you're not familiar with Max Roach, or if you haven't checked out much of his stuff beyond kind of the more classic things with Clifford Brown and his own band, these next two episodes are for you. So let's dive into it. 10 Reasons to Love, the first half of the great Max Roach.
How do we start? I say this every time. 10 Reasons to Love Max Roach times 1,000. I'm kind of glad we waited until we got a few episodes in to do this one. And I deliberately didn't choose anything for me personally because all the stuff I listen to, I probably listen to Max more than any other, like, bebop or hard bop drummer.
Is that right?
For sure. I have notebooks of transcriptions. But all of it is in that 50s kind of Clifford Brown world, which ironically, neither of you picked anything from that era. So this is a lot of new music for me and hopefully for people listening.
Well, I kind of feel like we should start with at least I should start with a little bit of a disclaimer because Max's career was so long and there was so much great music. I was trying to pick stuff from a wide variety of his career, and you know, the Clifford Brown stuff from the 50s is a hugely important part of his career, but I didn't choose anything like that. So that is going to necessitate a volume 2 of this. So just so
Fair
people
enough.
don't go crazy in the comments, like, there's no Clifford Brown stuff. Hang on.
Yeah, it's like we're starting with volume 2 first, I think.
Maybe in a way. Yeah. I don't know. I got carried away just like looking through everything that I have and thinking about everything that he had done, and I don't know, other stuff was speaking to me, but there's so much amazing.
You definitely
music.
have the most knowledge of Max, for sure.
Oh, I don't,
Not counting
not of
anything.
everyone in the world, just of the three of us.
Definitely not of everyone in the world.
Who is the most knowledgeable Max Roach scholar? K-Wash?
He at this point, Kenny might be. Phil Schaap was definitely probably the most, but he unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But yeah, Kenny's pretty knowledgeable. There's some other guys though, some other folks as well that are very knowledgeable.
So before we dig in, I was thinking about this morning. The way we describe Max and how he actually fits into the world is slightly, I think, a little bit like the way academics describe Max is kind of like the architect of modern jazz in a lot of ways, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, I think
Like,
a lot of people describe him.
He kind of built the blueprint of how you would play modern jazz on the drum set. But if you look at his career, 1960 on, he was putting himself in really unusual, interesting situations.
Totally.
I think that's why I didn't want to add anything to this, because I would just pick the obvious stuff, studying Brown.
Yeah.
But like later in his career, his playing kind of stayed the same, but he was always interacting with different cliques and different worlds and classical. And
He was very open. I mean, he was totally open to all kind of creative stuff. And one of the things I like about that, as far as how he played, even though, like you said, his playing didn't really change that much, is that he brought his personality to all these different situations. And like a lot of the greats, it always worked in a really interesting way. You know, some projects he did worked better than others as projects, but they're all really interesting.
yeah, he's always taking risks. Like the thing he did with spoken word, was that Blakey?
No, Max
did
did that, sure.
I mean, sometimes you're like, this is just kind of weird, but I'm glad he did it. DJs or something.
Yeah. There's that great video of him with Fab Five Freddy, which is just interesting.
That's cool.
But he was totally open. But you know, to go back to your first point, you're right. I think a lot of academics in sort of that world sort of describe him as like the architect of modern jazz drumming, but he was kind of, in my mind, he was sort of the guy or the artist that sort of expanded on the basics or the initial blueprint for modern jazz drumming, because Papa Joe Jones and Kenny Clark, Big Sid Catlett, there's a couple others. They were sort of the guys that sort of built the foundation for how we all play in terms of the four-way coordination, comping. A lot of people think Max sort of originated, like the comping with the snare drum and the bass drum. He expanded on that. He kind of created like the first full maybe dialect of language, you might say, using that. And definitely, the whole idea of melodic soloing over the form of a tune and really playing the tune like, other musicians play it. He was certainly the one that really sort of was the first great master and innovator of that, I think.
We were talking before we started that there's an era right before Max that we probably should do as a separate episode. Those guys, who were Max's primary influences and teachers, and because he didn't come out of nowhere.
Nope.
So, I mean, where do we start? You have one kind of early era track on here. Do you want to start there? Or do you want to jump around?
Why don't we for those listeners that are maybe new to Max, it might behoove us to go slightly chronologically, at least to begin with.
So Coco would be the first thing?
Yeah, this was from a very important record date. This was Charlie Parker's first record date as a leader from November of 1945. Max was 20 years old, I believe. 21, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not very good at math. Anyway, he was young, and this is a very important recording for a lot of reasons. Charlie Parker's solo on this it's one of the great improvisations, but Max's solo is very, very interesting on this because, first of all, he's really just using snare drum, bass drum, hi-hat, and one or two cymbals, and the way he sort of plays this solo is very, very reminiscent of one of his teachers, who was the great Cozy Cole, who was a great swing era drummer. When Cozy Cole was with Cab Calloway's orchestra, he had a feature with that band called Paradiddle. It was like a drum feature. And if those of you that are interested, check that record out and listen to this, because what Max is playing, I think, is very much influenced by that. So we can take a listen to it, and then.
So this is 2 minutes and 8 seconds into Coco. Is there only one version of this?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. First time I ever noticed he's playing like half notes on the bass drum. I'd never really heard that before. Did you catch that?
He kind of is. He's playing some different accents, which I think are pretty interesting. But it's not a very long solo because, at least as the story goes, that's Dizzy Gillespie playing trumpet, but Dizzy also played piano behind Charlie Parker's solo. So this was an opportunity for him to get up from the piano, grab his trumpet to play the outro.
No kidding.
At least that's sort of the historical story.
Is there any photography from these sessions?
There's photography from that era, but not from specific sessions. I don't know of any photos of this session.
Seems like it just sounds like such a strange room. Like, where are they? What studio are they in?
I believe this was. Oh man, I don't know if it was WOR. That's a good question. This is where Phil Shapwood, he could give you the studio and the address of the studio.
Who was engineering?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're sonically they're not the greatest recordings because this was Savoy. It was a small record label. You know, it was a 2-3 person operation. They didn't have a ton of money. Yeah, so sonically they're not the best. But if you listen on good speakers or headphones, you can get a lot. I mean, he obviously has good hands. He gets a really good sound. And again, I mean, this is a young person. This is not a seasoned veteran yet. So, listening to this, you can hear like, man, this young guy can play, and there's some creativity. It's very interesting. I've kind of figured some of this out. His stickings are interesting. Max used a lot of conventional stickings, but he also had some very personal things that he did that accounted for a lot of the unique sound that he would get. But this is an important record. If the listeners and viewers are not familiar with it, it's an important recording for a lot of reasons.
I think all of them are now compiled on the Complete Savoy and Dial master takes.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. Really important music overall.
Very cool. Man, I wish I could hear that band recorded now.
It would be really interesting. It'd be really interesting. There were a lot of pitch problems on these records. A lot of those, especially the Dial ones, a lot of times the tape recorders would either slow down or speed up as the take would go. And so sometimes it would end up being almost a quarter tone one way or the other. And, again, it's what it was.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go to next?
Up to you, man.
What would be the next era? So what year was that?
1945.
So what do you got here that's in the 50s?
Let's see here. How about we do maybe
I have one in the 50s.
Yeah, why don't we go to that, Dave?
Yeah.
Plain Jane? Is that fun?
No. Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's do
Yeah.
that.
All right. So this is Plain Jane from Sonny Rollins Volume 1. I transcribed the intro to this track.
Yeah,
Really?
it's a great one.
Yeah.
I almost just was going to play the beginning because it's just so nice.
It is.
But
It's great.
I went later and
That's cool.
So
with the trading and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So we're going deep. So I love how Sonny Rollins always recorded long freaking tracks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, you think you played all your ideas? Nope, keep going.
He still has
There's a lot
ideas.
of really long ones too. I was listening to some stuff the other night, and these tracks were like 25 minutes long and stuff.
And his idea is just like a river. It's just, it's endless.
It had to be
It's
an amazing training ground for drummers to play with because
Oh.
it's not going to let you stop. There's no.
And back then, by all accounts, he was hard on drummers.
Oh, yeah?
He was very, back in the 50s and early 60s, he wanted a certain thing, and if you couldn't keep up, you were out, man.
What I think is interesting is how different these records sound with different drummers.
Totally.
Like him with Philly Joe is a totally different sound than with Max.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go. You said this is the trades.
Yeah, it starts at
7:05 into Plain Jane. Here we go. classic. I mean, all that vocabulary is so classic.
Yeah.
Totally. That's
How much of that do you guys use still?
all of it.
I don't play like that at all, but Tom
I
Tom
play-
plays all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
Some of it's obviously
it's
in my thing, but I don't really. When I hear it, it's like I really love it, but I don't play anything like that. You know?
Did you ever?
No,
Interesting.
Yeah, you don't come from that, really.
no, I don't really come
Yeah.
from that, and it's probably not a good thing in some ways.
No,
but,
that's not it at all. man.
but I really enjoy it. You know?
I mean, I don't come from Steve Gadd, but I thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, that's all very classic Max vocabulary.
Did you transcribe any of this stuff and deliberately try to work it into your thing, or is it osmosis?
No, I've transcribed very little as far as writing down. I learn a lot of stuff by ear and figure it out.
Would you play to the records?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't play along with the drum solos. Once in a while I would, like certain things I would figure out, but I was trying to get better at playing the music. So a lot of times I would play along and just listen and try to play like him.
I did the same thing with all the stuff I like too. It was very little transcription.
Really?
Yeah, almost none for me.
It's just listening. Yeah. I mean, it's listening and just getting the sound it's like learning a language when you're a kid. You know, you can speak hopefully before you go to school, but you know, that's just it. That's because you're around your parents and you just assimilate that language from just being around it and listening to it.
That can't be said enough. Listen. I mean, I enjoyed the time transcribing, and it was an academic kind of experiment, and I could share it with people.
Yeah.
But none of it ever actually came out of my playing, unless I played to the record and like memorized it.
I think sometimes too it can be the level you were at when you and what age you were at when you got into a certain thing. Like if you were kind of, if you got to a college and you didn't really have any of that stuff together, your teachers are going to be drilling you to transcribe all this stuff, and then you're old enough that you're going to maybe put some work into that. I think so much of my stuff happened when I was so young that I was already playing pretty well by the time somebody ever was like, oh, you should transcribe. You know what I mean? So I already kind of, I'm not saying I had it figured out necessarily, but I knew how to play already and imitate and copy all my heroes. So I never felt the need to, although it can be super helpful, just to sit down and write out a bunch of transcriptions.
Yeah.
You know?
I never had a teacher tell me to play along with records. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Never. It was always kind of the traditional learn to read, go through the books, and then listening is a whole other thing you do on your own time.
Yeah, see, for me, I took rudimental snare drum lessons, but I was just so into the music. I just wanted to learn how to play that music, you know. Also, if you're transcribing correctly, the writing down of it should be the very, very last thing you do. You should be able to play it all the way through from memory, you know what I mean, before you write it down. I think there is something to be gained from writing it down. I think there's seeing it. There's certain things that I think can help you, but it's all about just the listening and getting the sound and the feeling into what you're doing. I
think a lot of people, when stuff gets really dense, then people get into slowing stuff down, and then the only way to figure out what some of that stuff is maybe through transcription and writing it down before you can play it, or you're going to be kind of bullshitting your way through it.
That can be true.
And I'm not saying, I agree with you though. Like, I think it should be more about being able to, I mean, unless it's some stuff you just don't know what it is. But then at the same time, it's like, maybe that's not the thing you should be trying to transcribe. You should try to speak a little bit first. Yeah. And then work your way towards that or figure that out, you know?
I was lucky that I was like playing with a lot of older musicians when I was younger. So that's how I figured a lot of things out, was just on the gig. I think you were probably like that too. And it was, for me, I was never really interested in like writing it down, and I wanted to figure certain things out. Like I would hear like, wow, that's cool. Let me figure out what they're doing. But I didn't, I just wanted to speak the language, you know, authentically.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm probably going to say this a lot. For me, it just came back to just a love of the music.
Same.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, man, I want to be a part of that kind of music.
Yeah.
I like how it feels. I like what it offers everyone, the musicians, the audience.
And I was young enough that, coming up in the 80s and playing and being pretty serious about it young, there wasn't so much video for me to see of people.
Me either.
So I always enjoyed
ears.
just hearing recordings more than videos. Not sure when like Gad and Weckl DCI videos came out and stuff. It was fun to watch those too, and you could learn some stuff you didn't know what it was. I can see how they're moving now.
Yeah.
I still didn't transcribe it or whatever,
Right.
but I think so much of it was always just like trying to figure out what they were playing just from my ears.
And that's important because it's developing your ear. Because a lot of times now, like as a professional player, you have to figure out music very quickly. And that skill, I think, really helps you. Like being able to hear things quickly and kind of decipher and figure them out quickly.
Sure. Like learning all the new tunes, something on the spot. Like all the other tunes you've played help you play that tune. And I think a lot of people don't see that. To me, like it's an obvious connection. Like you've played so many normal things that you can kind of hear little things that might throw somebody else really quick. Oh, I see what that was, just an extra bar there, or that, oh, there was a bar at 2 somewhere. Next time around I got to figure out where that was, or whatever it is. But the more you've heard and had to play, you can kind of figure that stuff out. And to me, it was rarely like, oh, that's so tricky, let me figure that out. It was always just like, I want to play, like you said, play along with this music, whether it was groove music or jazz music or whatever.
Yeah, I think I got stuck on transcribing it right versus just getting my version of it. That's where I missed. Like I wanted it to be right. I spent a lot of time fixing transcriptions that other people had written. For whatever reason, I thought I got to get it right. I've got to know exactly how to play this.
There's nothing wrong with that, though. There's a lot that you can gain by doing that. I mean, there's a lot of things that I tried to figure out. And as far as stickings go, that's what's really hard about a lot of this music is a lot of these drummers spoke the same dialect, but they did it differently. And the sticking is sort of the key to their sound. You can have 5 drummers play the same phrase, but if they stick it differently, the sound is going to be different. And a lot of times the feel will be slightly different. So, you have to, I remember trying to figure some of that out, Like one of the things that Max does that's interesting is he plays single and double stroke rolls, but a lot of times he plays a 3-stroke roll, right, left. And it's a unique sound, and it's unique to him, and it's a very, it took me a minute to kind of like, man, that roll is cool, but man, it's different. Like, what's he doing? And I finally figured out, oh, he's playing it as a triplet bass roll, right, left, Interesting.
There you go. There's your lesson for the week. What's next?
Oh man. Let's see. Why don't we go with let's do what you were knowing, Dave's other pick. So this is from the Deeds Not Words record.
I have 2 things from this record.
This is a great record. And this was a very this was a really interesting period for Max, I think, because this was right after Clifford Brown had passed away.
I'll interrupt you for a second.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
What year was that Sonny Rollins record? And then where does that fall in where he was at with his own band? Like, was that at the height of Clifford Brown band?
Oh, it was right after.
Right after?
Yeah, kind of right after.
Okay.
And it's very when Clifford Brown died in June of '56, I mean, that was a humongous blow for Max. If anybody saw the great PBS documentary, they talk about that, which I was really glad that they did, because it really kind of, they had a very special connection, he and Clifford, musically, and they had a lot of mutual respect for one another. And I think, that really sent him down a dark, road for a while, which I think they would have done that to for most people.
For sure.
But what's interesting is Booker Little, the great trumpet player, he would also die very young in October of '61 from kidney disease. So Max lost these 2 amazing truly amazing trumpet players when they were really young, you know, and that
Yeah.
I think that had a huge effect on him just personally, you know. So it's interesting, you know.
So why did you pick this particular cut?
I don't have any real deep reason for any of these really. I just it's just stuff that I like, and I thought it's stuff that I've heard more than other things of Max, you know, stuff that I've listened to more. So
It's great, man. It's a great
Yeah.
track.
Is this a record where there's no chordal instrument?
Correct.
yeah, that might be part of it for me too. I just tend to like that in general. I mean,
Max loved it.
Yeah, I really like it in general. Always.
All right, so it's You Are No One off of Deeds Not Words. This is 30 seconds in.
So now that I heard it just now, I can kind of remember more of what I was thinking about when I picked it. I think I mentioned this to Tom the other day, like just talking about Max. I really love the way the bass drum is played. Mm-hmm. I mean, the comping in general.
A lot of bass drum.
And the bass, there's a lot of bass drum. And I like the sound of the bass drum. It's kind of, did I just say that? It's kind of like loud.
Yeah.
But there's also there's no piano or anything. So
Yeah.
it's like, I feel like the comping.
There's room for
There's
it.
room for it, you know. And I think I like that. And when I hear Max playing like that in a situation like that, it still makes me think, oh man, I could stand to use more of that or do more of that, you know. And then the time feeling on top to me, some of it's the recording, the way it's recorded, but it just kind of moves along really smoothly, you know. And the cymbals are just this real nice. I might say this wrong, but like it just feels really natural. But the comping is really kind of unique and interesting to me against the ride cymbal. You know?
You know what's cool about so much of Max's comping is it's very accessible, oftentimes very simple phrasing.
But it's not so repetitive like certain people. Like
Of course.
there's a lot going on just in that
Of course.
minute and a half or whatever that
But
was.
it's not. He's not doing anything that's like, wow, what
it's
was
not
that?
super hard to play,
Yeah.
Right.
But the phrasing
back
is
and forth
interesting.
a lot.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And he,
Because we all get locked into things where you always play.
Yes.
People only play snare into the bass drum. Like
Yep.
there's a lot of it sounds like basic options like that don't
Sure.
get explored enough.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
leading, starting with the bass drum, playing two notes with the bass drum and the snare, playing doubles, playing singles back and forth. I mean, it's just
I think
really interesting.
I think a lot of younger drummers don't really realize how much you can get out of just the snare drum and the bass drum comping.
Yeah.
Depending on how good your phrasing is.
Completely.
Right.
And I've talked about this a bunch, I think, on these podcasts and to other drummers in general. That's why I like playing without the toms so much.
Yeah.
Not even having them.
Yep.
Because it makes me figure stuff out and realize how much there is to say without any of that stuff.
Of course. Absolutely. You know, if we could we go to my pick, the Milestones from the Booker Little 4?
Yep.
So this recording is from right around that same era, 1958 or so. But check out how Max is comping on this, having just heard what we heard on It's You or No One.
All right. So this is, the track is Milestones. The record is Booker Little 4.
Yep.
We are 2 minutes and 16 seconds in.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go. Man, that's got a left or right kind of lope to it.
Yeah, and there's so much hi-hat going, different stuff going on.
He's
there.
not playing 2 and 4 on the hi-hat. He's
so different.
He's using it as like a third comping voice.
And real quick, excuse me, like you hear these players, and it makes you realize that you hear that in other players. Like as soon as that started, I can hear Roy
and
like,
Ed Blackwell.
Oh, I always hear Ed and like Max in Ed.
Totally.
But I can hear it just like, oh man, this sounds like Roy got all this stuff from Max, even though Roy goes back so super far too. You know?
Yeah.
What is the timing between this and Deeds Not Words?
They're within a year.
You're kidding. That's
Yeah.
like totally
He plays
different
very
world.
differently on this record. There's some other records where he's kind of playing like this, and you notice too, for those of you that are new to this record, check this record out because his phrasing, he phrases over the bar line. He's doing all kind of, it's like Max, but you know, it's sort of like an abstract version of what he would do. But I
love it.
It's awesome. It's really, his playing on this is really, really unique and wonderful. You know, he's very loose and very just sort of in the 58, 59 into the early 60s even there's some recordings where he's really sort of experimenting with playing like that, with using the hi-hat like that. It's really cool and unique.
What I was going to say about the previous one, which kind of carries through with this, and I think I've heard Jack say this, to like never resolve. Like he doesn't resolve. The phrases just keep evolving and going.
Yeah, Jack definitely plays like that.
Totally.
Yeah. So I think of like Elvin and Tony are usually hitting the ends of phrases pretty obviously.
Totally. Yeah, Max is very sort of...
Just keeps going.
Yeah.
Which is so, it gives it so much energy.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that sometimes, like depending on who you're playing with. Because there's often times where I'm like, okay, they need this.
Yes.
And then sometimes I could be wrong, and I just end up doing it because you get in the habit of doing it. But I think my instinct is to want to do more of that.
Of this kind of keep it.
Yeah, because I just like it.
Yeah, like
know?
we talked about it before. But when do you trust that everyone is cool with what you're going to do?
You gotta feel it out.
There's only certain situations where you can really trust that.
Yeah, because he's just playing.
Oh, yeah.
And it just keeps growing and building. Everyone else is hitting the form. He's hitting the form. He's just not giving you the obvious, here we go, start over.
That's a great record. I mean, everybody plays great on it. And what's interesting is Tommy Flanagan plays piano on it, but he's still kind of, he's not overplaying, but he's playing a lot of notes. It works, but it's definitely...
I don't know that record at all. I'm stoked to listen to that one because that just feels so like he's just
it's
got
a great
this weird
record.
Wobble. I'm hearing like Marcus Gilmore kind of stuff in there. He's probably checked out all this.
and I mean, that's the great George Coleman. Booker Little is just unbelievably brilliant on that. I mean,
George Coleman was on the other thing too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They were part of in 1958, 57, 58, 59, earliest 59. Max had a band of basically teenagers. Booker Little, George Coleman, and the tuba player Ray Draper. They were all like 17, 18, 19 years old. Art Davis was a little bit older.
So he had him before Miles snagged him.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, they were both from Memphis. Booker Little and George Coleman were from the Memphis area. Booker Little 4 plus Max Roach is a really special and cool recording.
And that's it for this week's episode. Please like, share, subscribe. Make sure you give it a thumbs up. Write a review in Apple or Google or Spotify, wherever you're getting this podcast. I know we've been sporadic. There's been a lot of things moving behind the scenes, but we've got a lot of fun stuff in store. So thank you for sticking with us, and we'll be back to finish this episode. Until then, go listen to some Max Roach, play some jazz, and see you then.